Predicting if NFL teams will hit their over or their under in 2025. Today we have the NFC East. Already dropped a video about the NFC North, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that out. Again, I will say, as I'll probably say 8 times in all these videos, I am not a gambling expert. I don't gamble. It's not even legal in Texas. I think it's just fun to take a look at these over-unders, see these lines that Vegas has set, and see if I think these teams will go over or if they'll go under. Like I said, we're doing the NFC East today, so we're going to start off with the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a line of 11.5. Last year they went 14-3. They had the 8th ranked offense as far as yards per game, 7th ranked offense in points per game, and they were 2nd in points allowed per game. So what's different this year? They lose Kellen Moore, their offensive coordinator. That's a really big blow. He goes on to be the head coach for the New Orleans Saints. Here's another thing about Philadelphia that's not good for them, is that they have an absolutely brutal schedule, which I'll get into more in just a bit. This division, I think, is also super underrated. I think a lot of people think that this division is average, but I actually think the Giants are going to be a tough team. I guess I'll get into that later. They also are coming off a Super Bowl. As you know, a Super Bowl hangover is a real thing. A lot of people are going to try to downplay it and say that it's not, but we see it unless you're a dynasty, and this goes across all sports. Unless you're a dynasty, it's a real thing. It's something you see in most leagues, and I expect Philadelphia to experience that at least a little bit, especially in the beginning, maybe even later as they get deeper. More injuries might add up because of how much they played. Again, we'll get into that a little more when I talk about the schedule. But let's go on and talk about the things that are going right for Philadelphia. For starters, they did win the Super Bowl, so they have a Super Bowl level roster. They brought back a lot of the key guys, even the guys that they lost due to free agency or even retirement in the case of Brandon Graham. I thought they filled those pieces good with guys that fit the system. They're not these high-end free agents that they brought in, but I thought they're guys that would come in and fit the system well. I think they did good as far as that goes. The offensive line is still insanely good. They still have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith on the outside, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts in the backfield. So overall, this is still a really good team and a really good defense. However, let's talk about why I think they're not going to hit 12 wins. The line is 11.5. For them to get over, they have to have 12 wins, and I don't think they're going to do that. Let's break that down. So for starters, I think they might start slow. I think the Super Bowl hangover is a real thing, like I've already said. I think losing Kellen Moore is a real thing, and that the offense is going to start off a little slow next year. So I think that's going to be a slow start. I did not look at the schedule and go game for game for any other team other than Philadelphia. When I was making this originally, I didn't do this by division. I just did the entire NFC conference. Philadelphia was the first team I looked at, and I went through and I looked through their schedule and did all that and realized it's not really how I want to do this. I kind of want to do this more so in like gut reactions and more so like how I feel like the team, like is this team a 10-win team or an 11-win team? But unfortunately, Philadelphia didn't have that luxury because I did go ahead and look at the schedule. So unfairly, Philadelphia got graded a little harder than the rest of the teams. I'm being upfront and honest about that right now. However, I can't unsee what I saw when I looked at this schedule. So let's start first with we'll just go by month. September, they have the Dallas Cowboys, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's a pretty hard start. That's 4 pretty tough games. I honestly see them going 2-2 in that stretch. You can pick and choose who you think they'll win to, who you think they'll lose to. Regardless, I think we end up seeing this as a 2-2 month of September. You go on to the month of October. You have Denver, New York, Minnesota, New York. I think this is a 3-1 month. Again, you can pick who that one loss is to, whether it's to Minnesota or to Denver. I really don't care. I think that happens, though. I think they lose to either Denver or Minnesota, and they end up sweeping New York. So after 2 months, you're going into your bye week. I believe that you will be 5-3 if you're Philadelphia, which isn't the end of the world, but it's also not great if you're supposed to get to 12 wins. And then let's talk about the month of November. In November, they have to play Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, and Chicago. That is another really brutal stretch. Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, those are all games they could lose. Of course, they're good teams, so they all games that they could win as well. But I don't know how much I love the team, especially if you're comparing them to last season. And then on top of that, it's this hard of a schedule. Other than the month of October so far, this has been a really hard schedule. I think that's another 2-2 month. So that brings them in to 7-5 with the month of December left. And man, it's another hard month. Take a look at Los Angeles Chargers, Las Vegas Raiders, Washington Commanders, Buffalo Bills, Washington Commanders. That is insanely stacked. Keep in mind, if I'm right, and at this point they are 7-5, they can't lose again. They've already took all their losses and they have that brutal stretch to go. Let's just say I was being overly critical and they pulled off a game more than I think they will. That makes them only be able to lose one game for the rest of the schedule. I don't think that's realistic. I think Washington and Buffalo each give them a loss, one of those losses for Washington. So that's at least 2 more losses on the schedule, with the potential of Washington getting both, which I don't think they will, but that's a potential. The Chargers getting them, even the Raiders, I feel like are a good team that can beat anybody this year. That's such a tough schedule. I don't think that Philly's going to be able to turn this into a 12-win season. So unfortunately, I don't think Philadelphia will get the over on this season. In fact, I think I like them closer to 9 or 10 wins than I do all the way at 12. So that's a hard under for me for Philadelphia. Next up, I have the Washington Commanders with a line of 9.5. Last season, they went 12-5, so they have about a 2-game cushion from last season to this season. They were 7th in offensive yards per game. They were 5th in points per game, and they were 17th in points allowed per game. Overall, I think this team got better this season, and I think it was very crucial for Jaden Daniels specifically in his development that they were able to keep Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. They also added Deebo Samuel and other gadgets to this offense, which I'm not usually a big fan of, but in this offense, it's very gimmicky, and gadgets are huge for taking screens all the way to the house, like a Cliff Kingsbury offense needs. So I think that's huge. They also upgraded their offensive line. They made a few moves, obviously the biggest one being grabbing Laramie Tunsil. Did lose some big guys up front defensively, and that definitely scares me a little bit when you're having to play a Philadelphia in your own division. However, I still think this is a good team. I think we could see potentially a Jaden Daniels sophomore slump, but I don't think it's going to be some drastic slump because he has so much ability with his legs. I think that tends to mitigate some of the sophomore slump that we see. They also upgraded the offensive line rather than like in CJ Stroud's case, it got worse. So I think they did enough around him. We'll probably see a jump in picks because he had so few last year. But overall, I think he'll slump a little bit, but nothing insane. I think the team around him got better. So for the Washington Commanders, they have to get 10 wins to get the over. I think they do get 10 wins. In fact, I think they get exactly 10 wins. I love them at 10. I think they could get 11. They could also get 9, to be fair, but I like them at 10 wins. So I'm very pro Washington this year. I think they're good. Is 10 wins enough to win the division? I guess we'll have to see. Which leads us to the Dallas Cowboys at 7.5 wins. And I've got to be honest with you, this feels like one of my favorite lines of this entire NFC. I love the Dallas Cowboys at 7.5. I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. I have them at the over. Last season, Dallas ended up being 7-10, so they need 1 win to hit the over from last year, and they didn't have Dak Prescott since like I believe 7 is when he got injured. They also had injuries to Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland and DeMario Overshown. So many of these key Dallas Cowboy players got injured last year, and they still got 7 wins. So I feel great about them only having to get 8. Dallas Cowboys defense last season was ranked 31st in points allowed. Again, I just rattled off all those injuries. I cannot fathom that happening again. I have to like be transparent. I do think that overall as a defense, like peak Dallas Cowboy defense, healthy Dallas Cowboy defense last year is a little better than this year's Dallas Cowboy defense, but it's not 31st in the league in points allowed bad. It's not significantly worse than it was, again, at a healthy point last season. I think we see Dallas's defense about league average, maybe a little worse because I am worried about their run stopping abilities. That was even healthy. They weren't good at that, and they didn't get that any better. unless Mozzie Smith's about to take some huge jump forward, which obviously I don't think he will, like not like that, not to fix this Cowboys run defense, then they're still going to struggle with that up front. However, I think they're going to force a lot of turnovers. That's kind of what Dallas's defense has always done, though. Like in the past 4 or 5 years, when they defense has been good, it's because they forced turnovers. It's Deron Bland getting all those picks. It's Trevion Diggs getting all those picks. They've never really been locked down in the sense of like they're not allowing any yards. So I believe the turnover luck will kind of bounce their way as they're more healthy this season. I think the defense gets to about league average, and I think this offense takes a significant jump up. Dak Prescott, whenever he's healthy, he leads top 5 offenses. That's kind of his thing. In the regular season, he's an MVP candidate because he just leads top 5 offenses every time he's healthy. He's healthy again. Something I didn't even mention is CeeDee Lamb had an injury last year that he battled with the last 5-6 weeks of the season. He played through most of them, but he was significantly damaged. You could see him holding his shoulder all the time. He was very clearly and obviously injured. He even missed, I believe, the last 2 weeks of the season. So it feels like you're getting the whole team back. You're getting Dak back, CD back at 100%. You're adding George Pickens. The run game you have to be worried about because it wasn't good last year. And is Javonte Williams an upgrade? I doubt it. But is the offensive line upgraded? I think it's kind of crazy to say, but maybe. It was very, very old last year. Now you're adding in some youth to it. In theory, I would think, especially when it comes to offensive line, that makes it worse. But I think the potential, the ceiling for the offensive line is now higher than it used to be. It probably starts off worse. Let's be real about that. But as the season goes on, I think we see it start to improve. The last big change that was made was Brian Schottenheimer is the new head coach. Mike McCarthy is out. I was never a Mike McCarthy fan. I thought it was a bad hire when they hired him. Now, do I think Schottenheimer's a good coach? I'm leaning no, but that doesn't mean he is necessarily. I got to say, at bare minimum, the vibes are so much better now with Schottenheimer than they were with Mike McCarthy. It seems like the team really likes him. So if they can keep that pace offensively, then I tend to believe short term he'll be an upgrade. Long term, I think this might not end very well. But it feels like to me a team that's going to come out and do well for at least a year or two before we see them kind of start to fall off a cliff. But I do think offensively they'll be good at least at first, and the vibes have to matter. It's definitely a plus to have. I really like Dallas. I actually think this is very unpopular, but I actually think Dallas has a chance to win this whole division, especially if Philadelphia struggles at the gate like I think they're going to. I like Dallas as like a 9 to 11, maybe even 12 win team, and all they have to do is get 8 to get the over. So I am hammering the over. Granted, Texas, so I can't do that, but I would, because I absolutely love this line for Dallas, only having to get 8, one more win than a depleted version of the Cowboys. Yes, please sign me up. And lastly, we have the New York Giants, who have a line of 5.5, and this is probably one of, if not the hardest teams to predict for the entire NFC, not just the NFC East. And that's because I feel like their defense should be one of the best in the league. I feel like they have so many good pieces, so many good pass rushers, and it just doesn't deliver. Even last year, I thought they should have at least a good defense, and they finished 21st in points allowed. Do I think they're able to take a step forward on this defense? I think they should be able to, but I don't know if that actually does happen, because I thought they should last year, and they didn't really. Offensively, they were 30th in yards per game and 31st in points per game. They bring in new quarterbacks. They bring in Russell Wilson. They draft Jackson Dart. They bring in Jameis Winston. The coaches know, Brian Dable, GM knows, that if they don't perform this year, then it's over for them. They're getting fired, and it's very obvious, very clear. So they're bringing in Russell. They're bringing in Jameis. Like I said, they're drafting Jackson Dart. They're trying their best to not only do a quick fix, that's definitely what Russell Wilson is a quick fix, but also tie their name to Jackson Dart. That way they can say he's their guy and try to stick around longer. I've seen that before. I know how that goes. So offensively, are they any better? I mean, sure, Russell Wilson should be, in theory, an upgrade, especially with the garbage they dealt with last year. Daniel Jones was out after a few weeks. They ended up letting him go. Tommy DeVito. We're talking about quarterback purgatory over here. So yes, Russell Wilson will be an upgrade over that. Jameis Winston will be an upgrade over that. However, the O-line's still pretty suspect, and the receivers are very weak. The pass catchers, if you throw in the tight end, Malik Neighbors obviously is him. He's a very, very good receiver. But outside of that, Wandale Robinson, he's okay. He's fine. I'm blanking on their tight end. He's so irrelevant. I can't even think of his name off the top of my head currently. I do like Cam Scatterbo out of Arizona State at running back. I think eventually he'll start, maybe not at the beginning of the year. I think it might be Tracy's job to lose, and then he'll lose it the way he fumbles everything like he did last year. But then Scatterbo will take over. Maybe he takes over at the beginning of the year. I don't know. I really like Cam Scatterbo. I think he's really good. But behind a suspect offensive line, a team with no weapons, and a team that's probably going to be down, although they shouldn't, because the defense, in theory, again, should be good, but the offense probably is not going to be able to keep up with the other team. I don't know. There's so many question marks here. I tend to want to go under, but the line's also only 5.5, so all they have to do is get to 6 wins. Unfortunately for the Giants, I have decided to go with the under. There's really only a couple reasons, and it's kind of unfair to the Giants. Main thing is there's a lot of questions I have about this team, and I feel uncomfortable about the answers. And the other thing would be I don't have very many NFC teams that are going to be below 5 wins, below 6 wins. I think the AFC, there is more discrepancy between the top and the bottom, but NFC, there's really not. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and follow. We're trying to do all of the NFC divisions this week, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see the rest of the NFC divisions. I already did the NFC North, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure to check that out. I also do fantasy football content on Zealous Fantasy. Same thing, just fantasy instead of sports at the end of it. So if you're interested in winning your fantasy football leagues, go ahead and check that out. I'll be posting videos on there 3 times a week, so go ahead and check it out.